Hello, 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 and a big warm welcome to Self-Detective Club. Welcome to our shared community platform. Welcome to critical thinking. Welcome to the process of finding out if any of the information in this podcast is going to be of practical use to you and your general well-being. Today we are looking to expand the range of tools we can use to help us do our very own self-empowered, self-directed, self-detective work. Hence the title of this particular episode, Is This Useful to You? Is this useful to you? As in, could this idea be worthwhile investigating? As in, there are a few empty spaces in our figurative jigsaw. Could this be a piece we're looking for? As in, if it's not useful to us, then let's bin it and move on. What I like about this question is that the information given is entirely voluntary, so it can be received voluntarily too. It gives us a choice. In a sea of instructions and prescriptions, rewards and punishments, doctrines and canons, this is something else altogether, a different paradigm. This question is implying that we can be trusted with the information, that we can be selective because, whisper it quietly, not everything that experts say is appropriate or relevant to us individually. Hell, we can even alter or modify info to suit our needs. What I also like about these type of questions, in a mischievous kind of way, is that it can act as a mirror in reflecting how well we understand ourselves. Like, how do we know if something is useful to us unless we know ourselves? Unless we have a response one way or another. For example, if you were to self-search, say, Eric Berne's parent, adult, child model, which is a pretty universal model for self-understanding, you might get it and find it useful, or you might get it and not find it useful. Yet if you can't place yourself within the model, then maybe this is useful as a clue that you possibly have a blind spot. So now you can work on this gap in your own personal knowledge, if you want to. As in, congratulations for noticing. It's all good. What I also love about this question, is this useful to you, is that it hints at a possibility of there being more options out there that we haven't yet tapped into. Which brings us neatly back to Gil Scott-Heron's first revolution. The inspiration for this club, the idea that there might be another way of looking at things that we have not yet been shown. I'm now going to read out an introduction to a mental health guide written by a doctor, which I have doctored a little to save myself from being bored and irritated. The author has taken care to ensure that the advice given in blah 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 is current at the point of publication. The reader is advised to read and understand the instructions, doobie-doops, and to carefully consider blah blah blah. The author will have no liability for adverse reactions. Blah, blah, blah. This sort of psycho-educational bullshit language, this sort of suck the life out of the subject, why don't you tone, is something very familiar to me in the 40 years I've been involved in mental health. I'm trying to imagine what this doctor would say to a patient who has recently discovered shamanic practice and is now considering going on a medicine walk. Or how might he respond if he heard my mum say that the one therapy that helped her the most in her lifetime was something called hot tub rebirthing? Here's my own imaginary doctory response. There is no evidence to suggest this works. My advice would be to stick with what is observable and measurable. There is a scientific law that states that a certain percentage of scientific laws will be disproved within a certain period of time. I can't remember the name of this law. Maybe because it has now been disproved, banished, disgraced. But even if it has been disproved, can we still take what we want from the idea, providing nobody gets hurt? Disclaimer, disclaimer. Because it might have a use, even if it is a different use to the one that was intended. A happy accident, like blue tack. I mean, the term trauma dumping isn't something currently recognized by the scientific community, but it's still a thing. I've heard experty people frown upon the term. I don't get it. Surely new words are there to help each new generation work out what the flippy Nora is going on around them. If it has meaning, then it has currency. I mean, emotions were called passions at one time or another. And no doubt in 50 years' time, when the scientific world uncovers some serious new affective phenomena, they will be called another word altogether. Bing bong boops. I mean, phrenology was around for nearly 100 years before it was finally recognized as a crock of racist shit. Why did it take so long? And why is it still taking an age for behaviorism to be seen as anything other than dangerous, ideological dodgebodge? Answers on a postcard. Answers on an email. podcast@selfdetective.net, earmarked for Simon, if you wish. So I don't know about you, dear listener, but I'd like to think I operate within the realms of common sense. I'm more interested in what works than what has been marketed. I like the duck test. If it looks, walks, quacks like a duck, probably is a duck. I've even adapted this test to suit my own purposes. If a piece of information sounds right to me, if it connects in some way with bits of my own understanding of the world, then I'll allow it to playfully orbit my consciousness. Why am I saying all of this? Why am I having a pop at science? Well, it's only because there is a whole world of tools out there that are just waiting to be utilized. But they're not being picked up because the landscape of mental health is so bloomin' restricted, dominated by rigid and narrow scientific and dogmatic pathways, dominated by psychology, and only then certain types of authoritarian psychology that have been able to call themselves evidence-based, a great way to prevent others from having a piece of the action. There is more to say on this theme for sure, if you're interested, in another time, another place. But without further ado, let's open the gates ourselves and see what we might find. And let's start with a musical accompaniment from Smog. To be of use. To be of some hard, simple, undeniable use. Oh, like a spindle. Or, oh, like a candle. Or, horseshoe, or, oh, like a corkscrew. Let's start with the camera on a wide angle setting. There are three main divisions to learning: the arts, the humanities, and the sciences. We know this. This is how it is. We also know there is formal learning and informal learning. As Lev Vygotsky pointed out, we learn from academic text, just as we learn in our own homes, on the street, in buses and in bars. Nothing is off limits when it comes to spontaneous moments of learning. And in this way, we can get just as much value from throwaway comments in conversations, lines in comic books, scenes from films, lyrics from songs, brushstrokes from paintings, as from, say, any structured self-help books. In this way, we can gain just as many tools from sculpture, from knitting, from being phenomenologically minded, as we can from exploring attachment theory and mentalization, great as they are. So, just like we did with the Making a Start episode, in this overview, we're going to rattle through lots of ideas, concepts, and tools that you may be able to apply to your own life in a manner of your own choosing. Some of these ideas we will explore in greater detail in other shows when there's enough time, energy, and goodwill. But in truth, we'll barely scratch the surface of all the potential well-being apparatus that are available to us. Yet I'm hoping that's okay, because as a consequence of demonstrating how easily everyday stuff can be requisitioned for our own purposes, I trust that this will encourage you, dear listener, to unearth your own utilitarian wares as part of your own self-detective persona. Right, here we go. Let's start with a line. A line is a shape. It's a one-dimensional figure. It is a long, narrow mark. You can use a line for all sorts of things, geometrically, creatively, expressively. You can use it to measure things, draw things. You can use it to represent things. You can use it metaphorically. Because it is such a basic shape, you can apply all sorts of uses and meaning to it. In the past, Self-Detective has used the idea of a line as representing a journey, perhaps one from A to B. We have used it as a timeline, a framework to help people plot chronologically some of the major life events they've experienced. We have also used it for continuums, where you can place an X somewhere on a line between two fixed poles, in answer to a question such as, are you your own best friend or your own worst enemy? Do you seek pleasure or avoid pain? Then again, we've used a line to doodle, to hatch, to crosshatch, to weave, braid, contour, map. And the same applies to more advanced shapes: circles, triangles, squares, stars, pyramids. They can be turned into pie charts, drama triangles, windows of tolerance. And then don't forget, you can have multiple shapes too, if you want, like Venn diagrams, XY axes graphs, tables, etc. And if coloring helps, then we add color. So knowing this, hearing this now, can you say if there is a shape that would be especially useful for you in some way? Because if there is, great. But if there isn't, we move on. And now we have arrived in the land of symmetry, where shapes and formations have a balance to them. Now, in mathematical terms, this is defined as a shape that remains unchanged even when you rotate it or when you scale it, because of its self-similarity properties. Whereas in art terms, symmetry is often associated with design, harmony, and beauty. Like, wow, take a look at these snowflakes, these fractals, these crystals. Aren't these Roman ruins pretty impressive, architecturally speaking? In the humanities, symmetry, and indeed asymmetry, can be used to explore power dynamics, not to mention the fundamental laws of existence. The golden rule, anyone? And again, is this useful to you? Or could this be useful to you with a little bit of jiggery and pokery? Is this setting you off on a path of how you might use symmetry for the purposes of your own wellness and your own personal development? Just out of interest, in David Wade's wee book called Symmetry, The Ordering Principle, he ponders on symmetry within a sociological context, particularly this idea of being reciprocal, relationally speaking, that there is a cause and effect to the actions we take, that how we treat others the same way we would like to be treated ourselves. When it comes to universal wellness, we can see in the past 10,000 years a lot of asymmetry creeping into our society, with inequalities and oppressions, hierarchies, domination, etc. Just a thought. So now, dear listener, where do we go from here? Is it down to the lake, I fear? We could stay with mathematics. We could start using numbers to represent stuff. Like, pick a number between 1 and 10, where 1 is mild and 10 is super not mild. Or we could move across to equations to work out what pieces, what ingredients constitute this and that aspect of our lives, and what value we might give to each of them. The notion of an equation is that the content of two sides of an equal sign amount to the same thing. Other words connected with equations are matching, balancing, and comparing. Using equations in self-detective work may be an interesting way to understand some of the things that are going on for you, or perhaps they can open up your mind to new ways of tackling problems. So what do you make of these examples? Being real equals self-awareness times courage. Joy equals love minus fear. Jealousy equals mistrust divided by self-esteem. Anxiety equals uncertainty times powerlessness. Hope plus awareness plus investing time in yourself equals greater opportunities for change, while hopelessness plus fear plus no time equals no change. And again, is this useful to you? If so, can you make up your very own calculations? And if not, we move on. And maybe branch out into set theory, where everything can fit into brackets, which could be a good way of separating things out, like which brackets do you fit into and which do you not? Otherwise, we can always turn to chemistry. A periodic table is an arrangement of chemical elements placed in different rows and columns depending on their similarities and differences. Some of these elements are solid, some liquid, some gases, some are radioactive, flammable, volatile, capable of exploding at any moment in time. Some are dull, stable, inflammable, heavy. Some are colorless and odorless, while others are bright and pungent. Some bond together, some oxidize, some vaporize, some don't. Some are imitations of the real thing, some are really hard, while some are mushy, and some are tough, and some are deadly. If we were to apply these elements to the characteristics of the people in our lives, past and present, do any of these elements sound familiar? Like, what happens or what might happen when you put these elements / people together? Some chemical reactions are incredibly beautiful and create something beautiful. Some are beautiful but produce something less appealing. Some reactions are scary, yet they produce something of wonder. And some reactions happen over a long period of time, while others are over in a flash. As Carl Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And speaking of Carl Jung, his journey into the human condition took him all over the bloody shop. Into alchemy, mythology, philosophy. He even traveled to remote indigenous communities to seek answers. Is this useful to you? Is this helping to trigger any ideas for you? Are you getting any pictures? We spent a fair bit of time in the very heart of hard science, and we have found ways to find tools for our own needs. I find that pretty cool, subversively so. So now imagine what we could do in the warm, soft underbelly of the arts and the humanities. Game theory is often used in business and economics, but can just as easily help to solve conflicts and ethical dilemmas if we read up on it. Otherwise, if we want to keep our tools extra playful, let's just go with games. Let's start with a pack of playing cards in our hand. I know there are different types of playing cards across the world, but that doesn't matter a fig. This is all about symbolism. You are invited to open up a pack of cards and to spread them out across the table. Take your time and pick up to 5 cards that represent what you were dealt with at birth. There's no right or wrong ways of doing this. You are merely choosing different cards with their different designs, different colors, different suits and numbering to represent anything you want. Could be love, life chances, healthy genes, etc., etc. Just go for it. Once you've picked your cards, you might want to make a note of them or take a picture before you put them all back into the mix. You might also want to think and feel about what the cards are saying about your start in life. If you do this exercise in a group or as a family, you could get to talk more about the rationale for each of your choices. You are now invited to repeat this task once more, only now you are choosing up to 5 cards that represent you in the very present moment. Do you still have the same cards you had at birth, or have some of them, if not all of them, changed? If so, what has happened in your life to date to bring about these changes? The final task is to pick the cards you would like to have in the future. What can you hope for? Anyone who has a set of cards can do this exercise whenever they like. And that is but one way of using playing cards. Another way could include picking cards that match significant people in our lives, starting with one card that is you, and then the next person, and the next person, and so on. How close to your own card do you want to put the other cards on your table? Well, you get to decide. So, if you find games an interesting proposition, you might want to consider how board games could be adapted to suit your needs. I mean, surely Snakes and Ladders is going to be useful for some people. Otherwise, we move on and broaden our range to include objects, everyday objects. Boxes can be useful for containing your work. Treasure chests and bins can also play a part. A chair can be useful for the empty chair exercise if you wish to explore this further. And then for some people, a pillow is just as handy. And what about toys? Puppets for puppetry, clothes for psychodrama, a tray and some sand for sand tray work? Or how about this? An object that exists in a kitchen but can be useful to play with in your head. Spinning plates can often be seen at a circus or variety shows. Performers are able to balance more and more plates on top of sticks and keep them all spinning at the same time without any of them falling. It's no mean feat. If we took the spinning plate concept and applied it to our own world, could each plate represent a part of our lives that we feel obliged to keep spinning or juggling? Could each plate be a person, a situation, a routine, a habit or a duty, or a dilemma or a need or a compulsion? If so, how many plates would you say you are spinning at this very moment in time? And can you name them? And can you say what would happen if you let a spinning plate crash to the floor? Or how about a living object that doesn't really exist? Or at least it might exist, but we haven't seen one yet. I'm sorry, I need to own my own stuff here. I haven't seen one yet. I'm talking about aliens. Jeez. I'm talking about having an imaginary alien as a sidekick while you do some of your detective work. Where you meet this alien and what the alien looks like does not need to be important, nor where they come from, what the planet looks like, how they eat, or indeed what you decide to call them. The advantage of having an alien to bounce off is that they're not human. So when you have a conversation with them, you will need to explain things from the very beginning, because they do not know about love or pain or trust or justice. They don't know what makes you tick until you tell them. They will be interested in things that you take for granted, things that you've never really truly thought about for any great length of time. And that could be a really interesting sounding board if you want to. But if you don't, we move on. We move into characters. Are there any characters from books or films or paintings, etc., that you were drawn to, that you would like to emulate in some way, become friends with? Could following this thread of inquiry be useful to you in some way? When I was a teenager, I fell in love with the Glass family that J.D. Salinger wrote about. I infiltrated their stories, and they permeated my own world. They still do. If I need to have a good cry, there are plenty of scenes from films I can go to, from My Life as a Dog to Au revoir les enfants to Let the Right One In. childhood traumas are pretty much guaranteed to enrich my process of blubberation. But this is not about me. This is about you. Name those characters. Or don't. Okay, we're coming to the end of this episode, and there is still so much we haven't touched upon. Using music for wellness. Yeah, obviously. Using our bodies for somatic, self-regulating wellness. For sure, for sure. And of course, even though I slagged it off a bit, there are some pretty cool ideas from the world of psychology. The bits that manage to avoid all of that normalizing and conforming bullshit. And of course, there is words. Plenty of words that might be useful to us. Oh my days. Totally. You might have heard our first open letter podcast for people in a dark place. The idea of open letters to help people in their moment of need is something I really like and would love to have more of them to share amongst ourselves. Open letters around addictions, eating disorders, abuse. I think that they could be a really valuable resource. I mean, has anyone read a more powerful victim impact statement than that read in court by Chanel Miller? I'll put the link on the show notes. It's a tough, triggering read, but also incredibly, amazingly self-empowering at the same time. We've now reached the call to action part of the podcast. Pretty soon, we're going to launch a common treasury of self-directed tools for people to access online, thanks to Zotero and the like. Creating a collaborative smorgasbordy library has never been easier, and for it to work, we'll need a diversity of themes as well as a diversity of volunteers. I wouldn't want this to just come from the perspective of some rando counsellors in the northeast of England. If you like the idea of suggesting links to information that will be right up our street, or if you like the idea of helping to compile and maintain such a thing, then do get in touch. podcast@selfdetective.net. In the meantime, you might want to check out the portal on the Self Detective website, where you can privately interact with the knowledge that is coming your way. I'll leave you now with one last thought before the sound of the samphires fades up. Could this be of use to you? Using visual imagery to express yourself, your inner workings, and the world around you. If images have the power to convey sentiments and expressions in the way that words never can, which images, be they pictures, photographs, stills, paintings, cartoons, abstracts, landscapes, cityscapes, buildings, portraits, which have meaning for you? In 2013, Grayson Perry produced a giant self-portrait, which he called Map of Days. Later, it was shown in the National Portrait Gallery in London, among lots of famous pictures of famous people. What was unusual about this portrait was that it didn't reveal Mr. Perry as people might have seen him before. It didn't depict his hair, eyes, skin, or teeth. This was a portrait of Grayson Perry's inner life, as represented by a metaphorical map of a walled town. It encapsulated the artist's self and their identity, and included streets named Doing Your Best and Cry for Help. There were trees of education a river of imagination, and an area of paranoia. These are just a few amongst the maybe thousands of landmarks that make up the artist's sense of themselves. If you set yourself a task to go on a journey to understand yourself through visual means, what would your initial response be? The work could be any size, any form, any colours, any textures. It could be something you never show to anyone, or perhaps you would be willing to share it with us anonymously so that we can share it with our community. Just a thought. Bye for now.